A subject that is often overlooked for women over the age of 40, 45, and 50 is their mental health. And often they're being prescribed medications, which I'm not necessarily anti medication at all. I think medications have a time and a place. But what I see as a coach is women are often overprescribed antidepressants, anti anxiety, and this becomes quite an issue as they move through late perimenopause into menopause. Today, I have with me a guest that offers an alternative that I know you are going to find very interesting and beneficial. Today, I have with me Dr. Laurel Mellin, and I'm actually going to bring up my notes so that I can introduce her. Dr. Laurel Mellin is a health psychologist and the founder of Emotional Brain Training. She is a 2 times New York Times best-selling author and the author of the new book, 123 Joy, Easy Natural Weight Loss that is scientific, proven, drug-free, and fun. She has written 10 books and specializes in neuroplasticity, stress resilience, health psychology, nutrition, obesity, and emotional evolution. Dr. Mellon, welcome to the show.
What a pleasure to be here, Carol. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited to dive into your method, which is EBT. And I just want to start by what exactly is EBT and how does it work?
Well, everyone knows they have a thinking brain, but most people don't know they have an emotional brain. So the emotional brain is the unconscious mind. It controls eating, weight, relationships, survival, health, everything that's important. And in that brain, there's something called the amygdala. And what's in the amygdala is circuits that are stored from your experience of life. And whatever you did before, particularly when you're stressed, it's going to activate a circuit and you're going to do biochemically whatever it tells you to do in terms of driving you to one excess or another or one mood state like depression or anxiety. So essentially, your biochemistry is not controlled by the medications you take. It is controlled by your amygdala. If your amygdala is activating these circuits, they're called survival circuits that make you stressed out and attached to an unhealthy mood or a behavior, you're going to be chronically stressed. You're going to drain all of those good neurotransmitters, and you're going to have to take a lot of medications. So the role of emotional brain training is to appreciate these survivals, these circuits in your brain that drive these reactions where you get stuck in a state are the major cause of medical problems in the United States. And we've never had a method before. It's a new paradigm where everybody can learn how to identify one of these survival circuits and rewire it. And when you rewire it, it is gone. And so you don't have those drives and urges and you don't have those chemical surges. So it's really foundational to healthcare.
So interesting. So now, is this something that takes a lot of time to learn how to do, to learn how to implement?
Well, what's interesting is most of us waste a lot of time because we're in stress. In other words, there's 5 levels of stress in the brain. When you're at level 1, which is optimal chemically, and also emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, your thinking brain's in charge, and that's called brain state 1. Okay, your brain is perfectly capable of getting from any stress level to brain state 1 in 1 to 3 minutes with emotional brain training. You can't do it with mindfulness or cognitive control or positive thinking because the thinking brain, when you're in stress, goes offline. And then you're just the victim of these circuits because you've got to do whatever they tell you to do. So 1 is also called joy. And essentially, then 2 is right about here in your brain. You feel good. And then you get into trouble right around your cheekbone here because they're in the brain, you're in the limbic system, and the emotions don't tell you what they need. They tell you, well, how do I feel? I don't know. I feel anxious or I feel whatever. It doesn't tell you what you need. Whereas if you're at 1 or 2, how do I feel? I'm hungry, need some food. How do I feel? Lonely. I need a hug. Whatever that is, emotions are accurate. After that, you're in trouble. And the role of EBT is at 3, which is a little stressed, 4, definitely stressed, like depressed, and 5, like really stressed out with these survival circuits telling you to do things. So at 3, 4, or 5, we are really uh, in the pits. We can't think our way out of it. And so naturally, we're going to go to food or technology or drinking or whatever we're doing. And we don't know what to do when we drain all our feel good chemicals, and then we have to take more medications. So with EBT, you come in and it's very gentle. You come in and you get our app and you go to drop in sessions because it's the emotional brain, it's the social brain. You've got to listen to others. It's about emotional connectivity. And you learn how to get from 3, 4, or 5 using these simple tools, 1 to 3 minutes, all the way up to joy. And you learn that, wow, I've really been stressed all my life, and I didn't even know I was stressed because I didn't know how to get out of it because I didn't have the emotional tools of EBT. Remember, this was developed at the University of California, San Francisco. I was there as a faculty member for 42 years, continually, and with my colleagues there who are neuroscientists, Igor Mitrovich and Linda Frassetto. We developed EBT over those years. So it's really an innovation. You can actually break up the anxiety circuits and spiral up. So you do that for a while and you say, wow, this feels really good and my life is really changing. And then you notice that you have most people have 4 of these triggered circuits. And they're the ones that really cause us to feel out of control. And then you say, I'm going to use the same tools to rewire 4 survival circuits. By that time, you're feeling so great. The habit of your brain is to stay up at 1 or 2. You notice that you don't need as many medications. You just feel connected to yourself, and you have more of a sense of the purpose of your life and can go forward with healthier and with more joy.
I love what you said about being connected to self, because I think when we're in that manic kind of stress state where we can feel almost swept away, like we don't have control over it. I know I've been like that, where my to-do list is too long, and I call them stress buckets. My stress buckets are overflowing, and then you feel disconnected, and you just start reacting, and it's like a runaway train.
I'm gonna copy that word. That's a great term. It's exactly right. But with EBT, I started as a young faculty member at the university, and I started working with obesity because I wanted to find the root cause of why children in particular were overeating. So I realized from old research that it's published in 1940 by a psychiatrist at Baylor College of Medicine that it was about emotional connectivity. And I was a young woman, and I'm 75 now, and I was 28 when I started. And I said, wow, I can teach emotional connectivity tools, and that will be all I need. And then what happened is I went in the clinic. I'm a researcher, so I was doing the research, and it was really working. We didn't know why. This one mother comes up to me who's in the program and says, my daughter has stopped stealing food from the kitchen. My daughter doesn't care about eating the sweets, and she's happy, and she wants to go out and play. I want some of what she has. At that point, I made the decision I was going to devote my career to figuring out what was going on in that little girl. She's now an adult, probably maybe she's watching your program. But the issue is that it took 25 years before the neuroscience of the emotional brain was so well understood, principally from research at New York University, that the emotional brain is plastic, that these circuits can change, but you cannot change them by staying calm. You need emotional skills to activate them, and within a minute or two, the contents of that survival message, like I get my love from food, or I get my existence from people pleasing, or any of these ridiculous messages that keep us running around the block, right? We find out what they are. And once we know the exact words that our emotional brain is telling us, the exact words, we hit it with the opposite and we weaken it and do it in, and that gives us freedom. So essentially what I learned was that we are not in complete control. We can't think our way out of an eating binge. And what we need to do is have one priority in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, you say to yourself, what am I doing with my day? And you have the long list too, right? I have 3 children. They're now grown. But I do have a husband, and he's probably about like two kids. So the issue is, when you say, I am creating joy in my life. What I mean by joy is not happy, happy, happy. I mean that connected, grounded state. Because just to go back to your point, when we're in stress, the thinking brain separates from the emotional brain. We are out of control. We're going to overthink, we're going to overdo, we're going to run around. We need to be connected. So you say, I'm going to be connected with a slight activation of the reward center so you feel that glow. We need that glow in our body. So you say that, and then anytime you're not in joy, that means connected, you just say, it's not me. I must have tripped one of those wires in my amygdala that are splitting my brain, and I'm not going to put up with that anymore. I don't have to do that anymore. There's now new emotional technology, so I don't have to. Go to your app, go through, and what you happen is all of a sudden you have a smile on your face. The stress is no longer in your body, and you start living that way. You expect more out of life, particularly during hard times like that menopause window, because there is so much cortisol and there's so much stress that you absolutely need to have supercharged tools to clear it, because otherwise you're chemically impacted in a negative way.
It's like a perfect storm, that window of moving into menopause. I remember going through that and having three young kids, working a job, taking care of my elderly mother and my father. My father was living with us and then went into hospice, and it was like later around my mid to late 40s, and moving through that perimenopausal window and feeling like, what is wrong with me? I had all of this, the unavoidable stress of managing my family, my home, but then also all of these chemical, biological reactions happening in my body. And I didn't understand at the time. Like I said, I thought, you referred to shame earlier, I think, either when we were talking off camera or on, about how this can help get rid of those feelings of shame and self blame, because we're really, we're human beings. We're reacting the way we're wired to react.
Absolutely. And it reminds me, right now we are training psychologists to do EBT, because current psychology, when you go to a therapist, it's really great to go to the therapist. And it's really, sometimes you have to take medications, but current therapy has psychologized something that's essentially biology. When you feel that way, when you feel overwhelmed, you say, well, what's wrong with me anyway? I must have a lot of issues here. You don't have any issues. You have some circuits in your emotional brain that were put there through no fault of your own. They get encoded. If we don't know how to process our emotions, the world comes into our brain, and all the stresses of the world, and then of course our body is going through all sorts of changes, so all of that stress comes out, and then we overall analyze ourselves with our thinking brain, and we're just a mass of stress. And so instead of trying to analyze why I'm doing this, why you're doing this is because of the stress chemicals. A wire has triggered the chemicals that put you in a level of stress where you are going to feel out of control. You're not going to have unconditional love for yourself. You're going to either shame yourself or blame yourself or someone else. And that is not no longer necessary, because essentially the first thing I would teach you, and come to our website, it's ebt.org. And at ebt.org, you get your first month for $1. And what happens during that time is every single day you have professional care where you can drop in, and you can see me twice a week. I'm on Zoom. And the first thing I'll share with you is that it is not your fault. When you feel bad, do not ask yourself, how do I feel? Because there are 5 levels of stress in the brain. And again, 1 and 2, feelings are very accurate. You just say, how do I feel? What do I need? From here on, you're going to you don't know how you feel. You just know what you need, which is probably sugar or going to the internet and spending money or whatever it is. And so save yourself a lot of money. Just say, it's not me. It's a wire that activates these incredibly strong chemicals. 8 different chemicals lead to overeating and weight gain, 8 major chemicals in the body. And right now, what people are doing is when they overeat, they go get an expensive injection of one of those chemicals. All you have to do is rewire your food circuit and your body circuit. Stop those circuits from causing you to have this morass of stress chemicals that cause all 8 of them to go out of balance. put those chemicals back in balance naturally than if you need to take extra medications or whatever. But fundamentally, most people don't. They just stop wanting the extra food and they don't really know why. It's because they rewired their brain so their chemistry changes. So they have freedom.
Mm. I think it's so interesting because I think about us having like old machinery in a sense, because we have that fight or flight, that survival mechanism gets wired, and maybe it gets triggered, I should say. We're sitting in traffic, or it's a nasty text, or it's a troublesome teenager, or whatever, what I was going through. And we live in a much more complicated world where, first of all, food is around every corner, readily available. And then we have these mechanisms within our brain that just get triggered, I think, if that's making sense.
Exactly. So essentially, we're out of control because of survival circuits. So let me share with you what a survival circuit is, okay? I'll give you an example of my own life, my own food circuit, because I had been at school that day and it was a bad day for me. I'd been bullied by this. Uh, I almost mentioned her name, but she could always watch this podcast, so I don't do it. This other girl at school was just so mean to me, and also there'd been an election, and I had run for vice president of the sixth grade class. Now, I don't even know if they do that anymore. And I'd gotten like 2 or 3 votes, and one of them was my own. So I was really, really down. I was really down. I come home and I was in stress overload. That means I'm disconnected. I'm at brain state 5, right? This is called fight or flight. And what I did is I saw that there were cinnamon rolls on the counter in the kitchen. I could have gone to talk with my mother. She was there, but I was ashamed and I didn't know how to talk about my feelings, just my thoughts or my behaviors. So I reached for the cinnamon rolls, and in that moment something monumental happened that would affect my life for 20 years. And really my whole life because I've been so influenced by it. From then on, that fight or flight circuit had this little puny food circuit down here combined with it. With this didn't have much power of me. Food didn't have much power. But when they connected like that, they create a new circuit, which is a fight or flight drive to overeat. So the chemicals of fight or flight are now applied to me. And so when that circuit goes off, I absolutely have to have the food or I'm going to die. There's just no way. It's biochemical, not psychological, but it's going to happen. I'm going to eat that one way or the other. Okay. So these survival circuits are what are controlling us. And these survival circuits can be teased apart. So this new food circuit, you activate it. It opens up like a flower, and then you contradict the expectation that they're attached. And you say, I cannot get my safety from stuffing myself with food. And you do it only when you're in an emotional state of 2 hours after activating the circuit. And what happens is they break apart. And then food becomes just food. And so when people rewire their circuits in our telegroups, because most of our work is done on telephone in small groups of 7 people, because people need to be listened to, they need support, and that's how EBT is most effective. And people say, oh my gosh, I rewired my food circuit. And then we have a little party for about 30 minutes. Everyone sings and dances and celebrates because it's not about the food, it's about the freedom. I don't have to take up my mind time thinking about what am I going to eat? What did I eat last night that I shouldn't have? Should I deprive myself? Or the drives go away. And so we can just our relationship with food becomes very sensible. Food's just food, and people lose weight and they stop writing down all their food intake because they're trusting their body. They're in a connected state.
Boy, the sugar, that I think is a big one, especially for women. It becomes something that we use to sort of comfort ourselves and calm ourselves down and make ourselves feel better. But then eventually you feel trapped. I know when I had my sugar addiction, it's thankfully gone. I would feel like a victim, almost like trapped, like it was controlling me, and I would be so frustrated. I used to do bikini bodybuilding shows. I did them for 10 years. Started late. I'm 62 now. Started at around 50 and did them until about 2 years ago. But I remember the first couple of shows when I was a rookie, because your diet's so strict. I would come off of that and binge. I remember
Mhm.
standing in the garage. I had bought these little, they're called Nutter Butters. They're almost like a Reese's, a homemade Reese's. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to have one. Stood in the garage and ate the entire the entire box. Then was so embarrassed, never told my husband, threw the box in the trash. And that's just an example very similar to yours, but just having this reaction that I felt like I had no control over.
Oh, you actually didn't have control over it. What happened is, so let's say it all starts pretty innocuously, right? I mean, sugar tastes good. It does have a calming effect. It's not totally lethal unless you have a survival circuit that means that the first time you put something sweet in your mouth, it's history. You're going to eat everything. So it starts like that, but then you're in stress, and all of a sudden you notice that you're really stressed. You reach for the food, and then you've got a circuit, and then you're out of control. Every time you can be even this is the really scary part of this. You can even be a little stressed. Let's say just maybe brain state 3, so it's 1 feeling great, joy, 2 optimal biochemistry, 2 feeling good, 3 a little stressed, 4 definitely stressed, or 5 stressed out, okay? All the big circuits, the binge circuits, are down at the bottom of your brain, and they're going to hide out until you can activate them. Stay present to the emotions, which is exactly what we do. We teach you how to use these simple skills in EBT. You can't change them. So what happens is you're let's say you're at 3. Well, stress is so contagious that that little bit of stress can actually activate a 5 circuit. And then once the circuit gets activated, now you're really stressed, which means you may feel stressed. You may feel like depressed or hostile or out of control. You may also feel numb, or you may even feel on a false high. Oh, this is great. I'm going to eat this. No, whether it's a false high, numb, or an unnecessary low, they're all stress and disconnected states. So you're going to have, just because these things are sitting in your brain and you're letting them stay there, maybe for the rest of your life, we want freedom from these circuits. We want to rewire all 4 of them. But just because you're there, it's like a loaded gun. You're a little stressed, and all of a sudden, what happened? What happened? We don't have to live
Mm.
that way.
No, we don't have to live that way. And I love the concept of the freedom and feeling like you're back in control. Now, as you were speaking, I was thinking, how is this different from, say, tapping is something I personally have not used tapping, but I've had clients to use tapping. How does that differ from a mechanism such as that, or meditation even?
Okay. Well, they're very different, but the major thing is that when you are stressed, you can find ways to calm down that are healthy, well, unhealthy, like eating, drinking, whatever, or of course, my former favorite, which was spending. I would write books, and I wouldn't buy anything. I would just sit there and write the book, and then as soon as the book was done, I found some really expensive clothes or some shoes or something like that. So whatever that, fortunately, I rewired that. So whatever that is, but the idea is that you can calm yourself in healthy ways like prayer, meditation, tapping, but they don't change the circuit. The only way you can change that circuit that says, I get my survival from eating sugar, is you have to, it's in your unconscious mind. The only way it gets changed is to find out what those words are, bring them up from your unconscious mind to your conscious mind. You can only do that when you process your emotions, not when you're calm, not when you're trying to, relax. It won't work. It just shoves the feelings down. And the circuits that you don't rewire, the survival circuits you don't rewire, keep getting stronger. And that's why there's a stuff and starve. If you shove it down, what happens is, oh, I'm doing really well and I'm really healthy and everything's fine. But the real problem is you're relaxed and you've used mindfulness or you've used things to relax, but you haven't stress activated the circuit to find the actual message that was encoded erroneously in your brain. Unless you have that specific language, you know what that message is, you can't rewire it. Basically, neuroplasticity is this, that the brain can't hold 2 opposite ideas at the same time. So if you've got this circuit in your brain that says, I get my existence from stuffing myself with sugar, it's going to stay there forever until you have the exact words to say, I cannot get my existence from stuffing myself. And the brain can't hold two. So if this is more rewarding, this one will go away. That's ridiculous. I cannot get my existence from stuffing my sugar filled with sugar. Wow, no, I actually get my existence from connecting to the deepest part of me, the love inside of me. And then I feel so chemically balanced, I don't even care about the sugar. So unless you actually have the insight of what is in the bottom of your brain, it's not the same as you think if you use cognitive behavioral therapy, which is no longer the right way to treat this based on science. Because if you change your thoughts, you are changing what is going on when you're feeling great. But it's when you're not feeling great, that message is hidden in the emotional brain, has to be discovered. So when you do that, essentially, you are getting that freedom from that excess. And so what happens is that's when you biochemically change. And that's why you can get lasting weight loss by rewiring those 4 survival circuits.
Now, what if somebody's having trouble tapping into that narrative that's in the brain? I always think of it as like limiting self-beliefs. I know I had one and it took me decades, like decades to recognize it.
Yeah. So what you can't, probably you recognized it, Carol, in a moment of stress. And right after a moment of
Right.
stress, that circuit is
Right.
unlocked. Yes, I'm getting tears saying this because people, particularly, those of us who are stressed during menopause, I went through that quite a while ago, but I still remember it. Think, and you're thinking, oh, analyzing, self-analyzing, trying to figure it out. Totally a waste of time, because it's only when you're in that moment of stress and EBT gives you a way to dip down into stress and then come right back up, does the circuit reveal itself to you. And once it reveals yourself, you have power. As long as you're thinking and not surrendering to taking a couple of minutes to dip down into that and activate that truth that's inside of you, it can go on for decades. It's called suffering.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was definitely me. And you're right. I was in a moment of stress when I went,
Yeah.
oh, what is this and why am I thinking this? And that's when things began to shift for me.
Yeah.
And what it was, you described your childhood narrative. In childhood, when I was 6, first grade, I was placed in a classroom for mentally challenged children because I wasn't learning to read. And I wasn't learning to read because home life wasn't great, and I would stare out the window and daydream. And so then the narrative that developed was, I'm stupid. Now, a woman, a very gentle, beautiful teacher, was in that classroom, saw what was happening, and she took me aside, spent time with me, taught me to read. I did learn to read. I went on to read at a much higher level than grade level, and never had a problem after. Could not get rid of that narrative. And so for a long time, I had this imposter syndrome. I would do something like get my degree, get, straight A's, 4.0, and say, boy, I fooled them. It was crazy the things I said to myself. And I had to be in my 50s to see it.
Yeah. So, I can explain a little bit more about EBT when you say that, because essentially people come in and they learn how to spiral up. So now they have the warm up in their brain. And right after that, when they know how to rewire, and then they rewire those 4 circuits, maybe that takes a month, maybe it takes 2 months. It takes as long as it takes. Food circuit, the mood that triggers it, that you get stuck in, the relationships where you're merging or distancing in relationships, so that causes you stress, and then lastly, your relationship with your body. Once that happens, those 4 survival circuits have stopped taking you away from yourself, disconnecting, and now you're connected to the deepest part of yourself, and the brain's habit goes from being at 3, 4, or 5 up to about 2. At that point, you've cleared your survival circuits. There'll be a few little ones here and there, but the big ones are gone, and you're reconnected to yourself. And then you start advanced EBT, which is you essentially look at all those core expectations. There's 2 kinds of circuits. I mean, the brain is so simple. I mean, it's so complicated, but when you look at it, not psychologically, but biologically, it's very simple. There are only 2 kinds of circuits in the brain. One is the survival circuit. You've got to clear and get freedom from those 4 survival circuits, because you can't rewire the other kind when you can't stay present to your emotions. And when you get stressed, you're going to immediately be eating, drinking, spending, getting depressed, getting anxious, distancing or emerging from people, or hating your body. That has to go first. But then the program continues to raise the set point of your brain, and that takes going to those very core beliefs that typically were encoded during trauma, during childhood, and they're right at the bottom of your brain, right there with the survival circuits at level 5, and you rewire them. So it is a 1-year program. You see changes from the first time you spiral up. And on our website, what we show you is different people who are giving their stories. And this one woman was saying, wow, I tried it the first time and I didn't think this would work. And then all of a sudden it was working. And she wasn't arguing with her husband as the example she gives, but it could be eating or whatever. So you see changes right from the beginning, and then you rewire the fourth circuit. But people stay because they want to build a structure in their brain that say, I do exist, I'm not bad, I have power, I am worthy, I can love, and I can have joy. These basic structures in the brain, and it all leads to rewards of higher purpose. So essentially, you end up with a brain in 1 year, if you stay with it, with something that would take 20 years if you were in traditional therapies, so that you can have a set point of joy and purpose. And that keeps you out of the chemical milieu of stress. So it's absolutely ideal for your health.
So, what's interesting to me is you have to be in that moment of stress to tap into it. And I think that's so different from what we've been taught. We've been taught, okay, yeah, the meditation, prayer, deep breathing, all of this has a place. It's wonderful. It can calm you in the moment, but you're right. It doesn't last and you tend to revert right back.
Yeah.
Is there a point, okay, you hit that stress point where you need to tap into things. Can people go too far, or what can happen in that moment?
One of the joys, and I mean, the emotional brain's the seat of the soul. So as much as I'm a health psychologist, I'm talking to you about neurophysiology and neuroplasticity. Why am I doing this? I want the suffering to stop, right? And I know my suffering that I don't have anymore is just not there. So I have more energy to give back. And I want that for all people. But the issue is that the brain is extremely supportive. The brain is so sweet because essentially it evolved for protection, for survival of the species, and for thriving. Again, the brain is set up, if you process your emotions, to get you through stress and back to joy. So not for psychological, but for biological survival reasons. Let me tell you what happens. EBT is very safe because your brain will not reveal a circuit that you don't have the emotional resiliency tools to
Mm.
rewire. It just won't.
Oh,
I mean, we have more than 500,000 people have used emotional brain training, and we're just starting, in a way. And it's because, if you go down to something that's too much for you, your brain just shuts off. And then you use this tool, the same tools. There's 5 levels of stress, 5 tools for self-regulation. But you essentially are in damage control mode. You don't have you basically don't have any feelings, and you essentially become you use the tools to get more emotionally alive and return to your joy. So the brain only reveals to you what is safe for you to rewire, and otherwise you don't even know it's there.
Uh, perfect sense. I'm constantly saying to my clients, this is a little different, but I'll say, your brain doesn't care what you are going to look like in a bikini. Your brain just wants to keep you safe. Because a lot of times women are trying to like starve themselves down to be a certain weight. And I'm like, no, your brain will push back on you and those hunger hormones will fire up. Your brain doesn't care. It wants you safe. And I think this is that same premise of you're not going to go too far because of that protective mechanism.
Yeah, it's built in for all of us.
So fascinating. This has just been an incredible conversation, Dr. Mellon. I know we're going to have to do a part 2
Okay.
to dive dive a little bit deeper into things. As we start to wrap up, was was there something that you want the listener to know that we didn't discuss?
Yeah.
And then how can they get in touch with you, follow your work, and try EBT?
Well, I think the thing I want people to know is that this neuroscience of the emotional brain has only been known since 2007. And it will take a village to get it out because there's so many medications and procedures and therapies we can use to avoid the emotional brain. I want them to know that you are your circuits. In other words, the circuits in the emotional brain control how you feel, what you think, and what you do, and biochemically drive you to do that when you're in stress. That you have, if you shift from the old way, the old paradigm was neocortical, thinking brain, cognitive behavioral therapy, and the overall stress load that we're experiencing today, and particularly if you're in that menopause window, you are being pummeled with stress all the time. We're now, that the brain does with chronic stress is it downshifts where, what area of the brain is in charge. We are no longer in the age of the neocortical mind. Thinking plus 5 cents gives you one nickel. We are in the age of the emotional brain. So, in the age of the emotional brain, you either play by the rules there, which is when you're in stress, you process your emotions, or you end up draining your neurotransmitters, feeling out of control and ashamed or like a victim and having to take a lot more medications and have problems. You have new power because of the neuroscience of emotional brain training. You don't have to do that anymore. One more thing. The basic expectation I have in life is that on the day we were born, we had all the inherent strength, goodness, and wisdom we would ever need to solve any problem. All we need are the skills to process our emotions back to joy. And we're now, if you're using EBT, you're now on the pathway to experiencing that power and enjoying life on a new level. So it's all inside. It's all inside, and it's an emotional processing. So if you feel out of control, if you feel like there's no hope, just say to yourself, that's a wire that got me to brain state 5, but I can rewire it, and then begin.
It's just beautiful to give, well, everyone. I mean, this is for men and women, but my audience being mostly women and women in midlife and beyond, to give them this tool to put them back in control. And then joy, I have always felt that it is a little different from happiness in the sense that it's a choice. I always say joy is a choice. I've been, I think I told you off camera that's been my word for the year 2024. And choose joy, and it's something that we can do.
Absolutely. But the skills are a little strange, you know. It takes an app and it takes dropping into these sessions and seeing it in action and seeing people actually change from stress to joy in a couple of minutes. So our website is EBT. It's like food stamps, except it's emotional brain training, ebt.org, O-R-G. And I have a brand new book because I'm personally committed to people having natural weight loss and adding on any drugs they need. But unless you retrain your brain to get out of those survival circuits, those big four, as soon as you go off the injections, and there are risks to the injections and expense, you're going to gain the weight back. And frankly speaking, gaining weight back effort has been so hard to lose it because you haven't turned off those survival circuits. So you're going against the fight or flight drive to overeat. It's so hard. And then when you gain it back, it's really demoralizing. So don't do that. If you want to use the medications, go ahead and use them, but use EBT. If you want to go on a diet, you don't really need to once you rewire these circuits, but combine it with EBT so you can turn off those chemical drives. No more suffering and lasting natural weight loss.
No more suffering, no more shame. And you're right about gaining the weight back, because I've seen that as a health coach many, many times. And it's like it makes a little, leaves a little scar each time that happens.
Yeah.
And it affects our confidence. It makes us doubt ourselves and our word to ourselves. And so this is just a beautiful tool. Dr. Mellon, thank you so much for being on. Again, I would love to have you back to dive into some deeper topics. And this
We'd
has
love
just been delightful. I'll make sure that the website and how to reach Dr. Mellon and sign up will be in the show notes. And once again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. And the book is just on Amazon last week, the One, Two,
Oh,
Three
yay.
Joy. So that's
Yay.
another resource.
I'm going to pick it up because I've got a feeling there are things that will be helpful to myself and to my clients. And to our listeners, thank you so much for being with us. And wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.